control of intelligence itself, as in wisdom, knowledge. Are we Homo sapiens? We're supposed to activate the inner wisdom inside all of us, or are we Homo mediocrans who just get little dribbles of wisdom occasionally, as long Facebook say it's fine for us to read about this golfer or that cricketer, I mean, come on, guys. it's absurd, So anyway, that's that. I also talk about how one thing that's very interesting is I talk about the geography of Europe. What am I talking about? What is Europe? Well, it's a very big region and very interesting. It's not the largest landmass of continents. I mean, Asia is far bigger, but it stretches, geographers say, from the Urals all the way to Portugal and Crete and Iceland and so on. And so it's very interesting and diverse. And I'd like to see leading intellectuals in each European country come forward and join the European Committee, and from all different perspectives and so on. What I also do is I give the writings and publications of all the people that are active so far. Did a lot of research on this. It's very interesting, and loads of different thinkers have written huge amounts of stuff. I mean, I've published about 50 books, and I've written loads of stuff. Well, I've met my match, because some of these other people active have also written equivalent, and it's not just quantity, of course, it's quality. So some of the people on this committee are Nobel Prize winners, they're members of different scientific academies, they have leading positions in academia in different parts of the world. And but I think the important thing is that to be an intellectual isn't the same as being a well-published academic. That's kind of easy, really. You just drop the stuff out and it gets published. No. It's about doing joined-up thinking, which is about being like at least a generation ahead of the current academic output, which is, because of peer review, it's always sort of held back. It's what the mob deems as acceptable knowledge, a bit like, Wikipedia. I mean, it's peer reviewed, it's all filtered, so visionary thinkers tend to get written off things like Wikipedia, because people aren't ready for it. So, and it's interesting, my page, students of mine have tried to put up Wikipedia page, has been taken down 3 or 4 times, It's as if the system can't cope with the complexity of my work. But we have people in Israel, we have people in America, we have people in Costa Rica, Central America, and in Russia and in India, who've all contributed hugely to thinking through the problems of our planetary situation. And quite a few of them are advocating some kind of global governance system, a reform of the UN, a reform of bodies that are trying to bring peace and world order into being, and make the world more accountable democratically to we the people. Some are involved in the parliamentary UN project, which the idea is to create a parliamentary forum at the UN, which I think is a jolly good idea. Like we have in Europe, we have at the European Union Parliament. So why can't the UN have a parliament? That would be a creative thing, and everyone could vote for the MPs directly. We also have a chap, Professor Rao, who's a member of the Royal Society from India, but he's also a member of the Pontifical Scientific Academy, which is very interesting because that's a body run from the Vatican by the Pope. You don't have to be a Catholic to be elected to that. It's a great honour. You have to be a very, very senior scientist, have some kind of Nobel Prize or huge recognition, and it's an honorary thing. And by chance, I've written to the director of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, suggesting that they ought to investigate the coronavirus outbreak, because they have the brains to do it. Some of the world's greatest scientists over the last 50 years have been members, like Heisenberg and Dirac, and all the founders of modern quantum physics and so on were made honorary members of this body. We have Palestinians involved, a wonderful man, Professor Sari Musabi, who was rector of the University of East Jerusalem, which I visited once, and I love it in East Jerusalem in Palestine. I mean, these people are geniuses as well. I knew the London coordinator for the Palestinians. He used to come to meetings in the House of Lords I was running at the time, Afif Safieh, and he said they'd done some statistical research, and Israel has the highest number of PhDs among their population per head of any nation on earth. It's only equalled by the Palestinians, which I found fascinating. You know, Palestinians are incredibly clever and sophisticated people. When I went and interviewed them in Bethlehem and Hebron and other places, you know, they're all intellectual superstars. They're poets and writers and thinkers, and you know, this conflict between Israel and Palestine could be sorted out if only the intellectuals were allowed to come into dialectic with each other and sort it out. And unfortunately, the warlords, the people like you know, the Netanyahu types, these people misuse militarism, misuse military intelligence. They control through their control of the media and so on, they create a climate of fear whereby ordinary Israelis are terrified of everyone, you know, that isn't a hardcore Israeli. And that's wrong. That's just anti-intellectual. I think it goes back to his dad, who spent years researching the Inquisition in Spain, and I think it did his head in a bit, as we say in English, because he got so paranoid. And he passed that down to Netanyahu, who's still fighting the Inquisition. You know, come on, man, wake up. This is like 21st century. This is the peace and love era. You know, hasn't got it. He ought to go and work on a Palestinian farm and meet some proper ordinary people, and just come out of his, you know, nightmarish, antagonistic mentality. And this is the problem when you see some people are very clever, Netanyahu very clever, but it's a sort of evil cleverness. It's a directed, ego-driven, I'll get you if you don't do what I want kind of. It's the Caesar mentality, who was vindictive to his opponents. And he passed that down, unfortunately, to his lieutenant, Mark Antony, who then killed off Cicero, who was the greatest Roman intellectual at the time. Caesar never did that. He was a bit cleverer. But, you know, warlords, that's what they are. So, anyway, have a look. I'm not going to, I can't, in the time I have, go through the whole list. I've also put who's on the European Committee. We have, you know, various European nations have people active already, but we need other nations to get involved. I have colleagues from Ukraine, from Russia, from Armenia, from Ireland, from Italy, from Germany, from Slovenia, and so on. And you know, but I want every single European nation to have a nucleus of their intellectual commitment made manifest for this peace work. And there isn't anything like this. I mean, you can say, well, aren't I like, well, why am I doing all this? The only thing that's at all close is the Davos World Economic Forum, but that is an elite club for people of vast wealth, you know. And I mean, to go to that conference, it costs, I don't know, about $10,000 a head. You can't, normal people can't afford that. So it's only for like cabinet ministers and people of great, you know, the wheeler dealers who go and pat each other on the back and say, aren't we clever? We're here in Davos. Well, that's not what we're doing. The World Intellectual Forum is for people of all classes. I mean, the founder of the phrase dialectical materialism, Joseph Dietzken, was a normal Catholic guy from Germany, a working class chap, who just was a very clever chap. And Marx and Engels pinched his term, dialectical materialism, in fact. He was a Catholic. You know, and so in the history of socialism, often people have been from working class backgrounds, but they've worked themselves into being genuine intellectuals. Marx himself was obviously an intellectual, but he didn't get everything right, as I've said in my critique of Das Kapital, which I'm gradually publishing. He left out militarism. Dear old Karl, I mean, he left out militarism and its role in capital formation and and the whole catastrophe that capitalism has inflicted on the world. He hardly mentioned slavery either, which was the fundamental energy that led to capital formation in the USA and in the British Empire for about a couple of hundred years. Marx leaves it out. So often what we have to do as intellectuals is honour the work of previous thinkers like Hegel or Marx or Kant or whatever in European history, or Plato or Aristotle. But then we have to fill in the bits and supplement the work they've done. It's not that we turn against these people and say they're all dreadful, here am I, the great thinker, going to replace them all. No, we have to honour the work they've done. It's like Troy, it has about 12 levels. When I went to Troy, I looked at the work Dr. I think it was Manfred Kaufmann had done, the greatest archaeologist, a German guy from the University of Tübingen, who'd worked out all the levels of Troy. Schliemann didn't have scientific archaeology advanced enough in his day to be able to work out all the strata, although he got the basic ideas right. But Kaufmann went through it with incredible detailed archaeological digs, season after season. He actually eventually ended up becoming a Turkish citizen. I think he married a Turkish woman. He just loved the culture. And his library is in Çanakkale, which is the town near to Troy. Very much worth a visit. Amazing. I love this guy. I never met him, but he was a genius archaeological intellectual, right? Who worked out how Troy manifests over these cycles of eons in these different levels. And that's what intellectuals do. That we come on to the work, of Hegel or Marx, and we have to see where they did right and where they went wrong, and we have to somehow supplement their perspective. Jean Gebser, one of the great European intellectuals who's mentioned, he had this theory that intellectual life is about a succession of perspectives, and how we perceive something in 21st century is based on how they saw it in the 20th century, the 19th century, and so on. And it's also bound up with the history of art. Gebser was a friend of Picasso and modern artists, and he reckoned that there's a link between the art of any epoch and the thought world, the cosmology, the perceptions. 100% right, obviously. Great man, Gebser, by the way. And in many ways, he's similar to Ken Wilber, who's doing a sort of Gebser from an American context. Pretending, of course, like most Americans, he invented it all. He didn't invent integral thinking. I mean, that was Gebser, that was Aurobindo, that was, many intellectuals, again, done the spade work. And what we have to acknowledge as intellectuals, is what we owe the layer down there that we're building on. There's nothing new under the sun. One of the great things that Goethe said, one of the great European intellectuals that we honour in The Wife, is he had this wonderful quote, which I've got a page of quotations, which was fun to compile, about intellectuals. Goethe said, "All intelligent thoughts have already been thought. What is necessary is only to try to think them again." I love old Goethe, What he's saying by that is that each generation has to download the fundamental values and insights and enlightenments. You can't live off what Buddha saw or what Christ saw or what Beethoven saw or whatever, or even what Goethe saw. It's what we see now. It's this generation, living now, walking around on Troy's topsoil. We have to be as brave as Achilles. We have to be as sneaky as Odysseus. We have to be as crafty as, the one that listens to the rippling oak at Dodona, which is where the god Zeus sends the signs so that we can, advance prophetically into a shared future. As Shlomo Soham, one of our World Intellectual Forum board members from Israel, points out, he's the author of a book on future intelligence. How can we think things ahead for the next 10 generations? That's what we have to do. So, the quote from Chomsky, by the way, is, "Intellectuals are in a position to expose the lies of governments, to analyse actions according to their causes and motives, and often hidden intentions. I love Chomsky. He's such a master of understatement, right? Yeah, I studied for part of my degree at the London School of Economics, where quite a lot of intellectuals have studied. And its motto is to know the causes of things in Latin. That's what an intellectual does. We're not interested in just the superficial, like, this is how it is type thing. We want to know the causes of things, right? And that's what Chomsky is saying. And that involves joined up thinking, because everything comes with multi-causality behind it. Okay, so that's what the World Intellectual Forum is doing. I give details of membership. You can contact, if you are in agreement with our principles, guiding principles and values, write in a letter. If you're in Europe, write it to me, in the post. I like it in the post. That means you care enough, This is serious stuff, right? You don't have to be an actual intellectual to join us. If you just love the work we're doing and want to support it, then just write in a support endorsement, and you can still be a member, And the only thing you have to be is committed to the values and principles we stand for, which is peace, tolerance, debate, discussion. If you're kind of just infiltrating in order to sort of stab everyone in the back, then no, you're not welcome, right? Go and do your own thing. This is for people that want to collaborate and ultimately to love. I've got another lovely quote in here from John Gray in Enlightenment's Wake, Culture and Politics at the Close of the Modern Age. John Gray is quite a clever British intellectual who retired as Professor of Intellectual History at the London School of Economics that I was talking about, where I did part of my degree. I studied diplomatic history there. And John was, he's a clever chap. He says, the central problem of contemporary thought and practice is that of securing peaceful coexistence for incommensurable worldviews in an intellectual and cultural context. I agree 100%, John, thank you. That's what the World Intellectual Forum is for. That's why every academic philosopher, historian, theologian, anyone working in academia should join us and get involved with their own, expertise. Yoko Ono, another great artist, musician, peace activist. I love Yoko, and the muse to John Lennon, who was one of the great. Now he was an intellectual and a musician. John could reflect on what he was doing and think about it, and that was reflected in his great lyrics. Yoko put it very simply. She said, the peace industry people are just intellectuals who are very critical of each other. Unless the peace industry is powerful, we're always going to have war. The war industry people are very together. They know exactly what they want. They don't even have to talk to each other. It's as simple as that. We've got to grow out of this conflictingness between different rival peace intellectuals. We have to be as joined up as the war intellectuals. The war lot know what they want. They want more money for the military. They want endless torture equipment, new weapons coming on stream. They want to silence dissidents. They're happy to have a few token Chomskys, but that's all. They don't want actual intelligence to spread among the masses, or they might question the status quo. And so they ensure that people like Trump and Boris Johnson, buffoons, are elected to put everyone off politics and to show people, make people think that politics is for idiots and trillionaires. Well, they're very well organised, and they can also organise their wars like 9/11, 2003 invasion of Iraq and so on. Well, no, we have to, as Yoko says, be as sorted as they are. That's what the World Intellectual Forum is for. We're the joined upness of the peace movement. And there are many specialist groups in the peace movement, and I love them all. I run the Philosophers' Peace Group, but we have to join up now. That's what the World Intellectual Forum is for. And then I also have a quote from Christ, who was an intellectual in Galilee region, which I've been to the very spot, and I have a photograph on the website of the hill on which he gave the Sermon on the Mount. I love that place. It's one of my favourite places in the whole world. And that photograph, which I took when I was there in '95, I love that photograph. You'll see it on the website. And what Christ said is, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God," which is one of that, Sermon on the Mount. Now that's the Gnostic saying. Blessed are the kathari, tikardia. The blessed are the pure in heart. Now that is Christ's way of saying, blessed are the really switched on, enlightened intellectuals, because if they pursue with their studies, they will eventually reach enlightenment. That's putting it into 21st century language. And that's why Christ was on the side of the intellectuals, not anti-intellectual sort of, but a teacher. That's why he was called a rabbi. He was always teaching, right? And yeah, that's why the establishment at the time tried to silence him and challenge his credentials. What right have you got to teach, etc. What right he had was because he had a realized higher intellectual awakening experience over several times. We don't know the full life story. It's still becoming clear, and that's why I've set up the Mary Magdalene Studies Association to try and understand more of her contribution. As a Gnostic, I think she was part of his awakening process. So anyway, yeah, and that's having a meeting, as I said, on the 22nd of July. What is intellect? It is a good question. What do we mean? Well, in Arabic, it's aql is the term in Arabic, and there's a whole long tradition of commentaries and discussions about what is this aql. And it's very, very important. It's the quintessence of Islamic philosophy. And it's in the Quran. You can't read the Quran or understand it unless you've activated your aql, unless you've activated your intellect. And it was that understanding of the hermeneutics of sacred scripture that came through when the University of Oxford and Paris was set up. Because our scholars in Europe understood from the great Islamic theologians of Cordoba, like Ibn Rushd, that you can study the Quran, you can study sacred scripture through the lens of intellect, through the lens of aql. And that's what Abelard did when he read the Bible. Having read his Aristotle, suddenly he was on fire with knowledge. And he knew that it's not a contest between pagan Aristotelian knowledge and biblical knowledge. No, it's the same knowledge. We just need to put it in the perspective. And that's the idea of Gestalt psychology. You need to put it into the 3D perspective. And then everything falls into place. Abelard kick-started the University of Paris because he was able to do that. And that's what European intellectuals have been doing ever since. So intellect is that critical analysis of revealed scripture, revealed insight, channelings, aha moments that we have or somebody else has. But then reflecting on it through, critical mind and rationality. In Sanskrit and Indian philosophy, it's called buddhi. Buddhi is the concept of intellect. Now, buddhi is what Buddha comes from. Buddha is simply a cosmic intellectual, to put it into English. What is a Buddhist? I have here Buddhist regalia. We're in the Buddhist section of my library, because it's by the, open air, and I get the sunlight in here. And buddhi is the cosmic intellect. And to become enlightened, to become a Buddhist, is simply to get a download of cosmic intellect, which is divine mind, which is the logos, the sapiens, which is the cosmic intelligence behind all existence. And the Buddhists have been writing about this for 2,500 years in their meditation practice, in their reflections on cosmic consciousness and on what is mind and where it comes from. In Sanskrit parlance, it's also called jnana. It's the intelligence of the jnana yogi who reaches enlightenment not through hatha yoga or pranayama or other forms of yoga, but through purely intellectual insight cultivation a jnana yogi, which is what I am, we do it through activating the higher intellect. And, the higher intellect is, as the Upanishads said, both the cosmic creator, Brahma, but also the individuated essence of each one's consciousness. And this is why that Buddha at the gas pump thing put out by Rick is so beautiful. Rick, I salute you. He is so faithful to his mission to bring non-duality to the American fractured consciousness. And he's always interviewing people. He deserves a knighthood. I know, I think the Queen should give Rick Archer a knighthood, please. I think she's given warlords like, all the horrible people that did the 9/11 wars and stuff. They've all got Schwarzkopf types. They've all got knighthoods. I mean, come on. Give Rick Archer one, please, And, so that non-duality, that insight, is when the cosmic intellect and the individuated intellect suddenly fall in love and realise they're part of the same thing. They're joined up finally. That's the jnana yogic path. Now it's interesting, the word jnana and gnosis go back exactly the same root. Gnosis in Greek is jnana in Sanskrit. And it's so the Gnostic tradition of Christianity, which Thomas and Mary Magdalene and John and the inner core of disciples that Jesus had, who could really understand what he was saying, not just at the level of faith, as Peter got it. Yeah, we love Peters, and they're necessary, but they're not intellectuals. They don't understand the inner point. Thomas got the inner message, so did Mary Magdalene, so did other people that were on Jesus' level. And that's the Gnostic Church, which Valentinus and there's a lineage going all the way down to the Cathars and to 20th century French intellectuals. A precious lineage which inspired my work for the Mary Magdalene Studies Association. And we continue to try and reconcile the split between the Gnostic interpretations of the inner truths of Christ's teachings and the kind of exoteric interpretations. I believe it is possible. I don't think everyone has to leave the church and become a wandering Gnostic. But I do think that we have to shift attitudes. That was Matthew Fox's point, and it's the point of Giles Quispel, who was one of the great Gnostic scholars of the 20th century, friend of Jung, helped discover the Gnostic scriptures that he got to Jung from the Nag Hammadi Codex, and he was a friend of Queen Juliana of the Netherlands. Giles Quispel, a great man, unfortunately dead now. But there are others. There's a professor of Gnostic studies at University of Helsinki who's written about Mary Magdalene in the Gnostic Gospels and in the Mani Psalm book, because Mani also knew about Mary Magdalene, and he was a Gnostic. Okay, so, well, what is Gnosis? What is this thing? Well, okay, let's approach it, via negativa. Let's say what it isn't. What a Gnosis kind of inspired person isn't, is an anti-intellectual. We all know the types, Goebbels, the Stalinists, who want to silence discussion with their own little package of knowledge that they say, this is all you're allowed, Maoism, you've got to read these books. If you deviate, you get killed off. You've got to read Stalin's view of blah blah, or Hitler's view. Mein Kampf was given out to all SS members, and you had to be studying it. And Rosenberg's Myth of the 20th Century, they were permitted. You could be an intellectual within that arena, but you couldn't stray outside. If they caught you with a Jewish book, well, that's it. You're off, chopped. Well, no, so those are anti-intellectuals, sometimes masked as intellectuals. And I think what makes somebody an anti-intellectual, I've researched this for many years and looked at it across all cultures and histories. You get the same types in every culture and civilization. They're afraid of learning, afraid of joined upness. They often call it heresy, Too much thinking, that's heresy. And you get this in all the traditions. Christian, Islamic, Jewish, everyone. Even Zoroastrians, there are some... Mani was called the heretic by the Zoroastrian priest of Persia at the time, who had him flayed alive. Come on, guys. That means ripping off the skin, all of it, tell you, you have no skin left, and he died. I mean, that's what Sophiaphobes do to intellectuals. And they do it nowadays, like with social media, or, well, sometimes they still do it with torture. And it's going on all over the world. One of the other things the World Intellectual Forum stands for is the right of people to think, the right of people to teach, the right of people not to be put in prison for their thinking. So it overlaps with the work of Amnesty. And my friend who helps run Amnesty, Dan Jones, who taught me art when I was a boy, who was a lodger in our house in Brighton. Dan Jones is one of the top people at Amnesty, and he's explained, yes, they do work with intellectuals and preventing the suppression of dissident intellectuals. But that's a specialised area of work that, you know, we want to help with. And already there have been a few cases. So if you know personally many intellectuals that have been persecuted around the world just for thinking, please get in touch and we will write the necessary letters and draw it to the attention of the authorities. You know, it's a legal thing, really. Because we all have human rights according to the, you know, signed up Declaration of Human Rights and so on. But it's not being observed in some countries of the world. And like if you're in China and you want to be a Muslim intellectual, you're probably going to go to the camps where they're sticking the Uyghurs, you know. If you don't accept their version of Islam, or if you are, you know, a Christian intellectual in Saudi Arabia and you want to go and share that and set up a little study group or a church, no, that's not allowed. You can't do that because you have to follow this kind of thing in public. Or if you want to be a Shia scholar, let's say I want to go to Medina and set up a Shia academy of higher learning, dedicated to the work of Ali and Fatima. Well, no, they'll call me a heretic and I'll be stuck in a prison. And they are killing Shias in Saudi Arabia just for wanting to think. The Shia tradition is a very, very rich tradition, going back to Ali, who was an intellectual, actually. Of all Muhammad's disciples, probably the most intellectual and the most learned. So why are these being clamped on? Well, I call it Sophiaphobia. It's a terror or fear of wisdom. And it's deep in the human nature. We are wise, we are Homo sapiens, but we also have this fear of our wisdom. People can't cope with it. You know, it's like they want to suppress it, and it's too, you know, it brings too many responsibilities. But that's what we have to do, folks. We have to shake off that slumber of Sophiaphobia. And it takes many forms. That's why I've written a book about it. So, yes, it's important that we wake up from that slumber. And if you think about it, things like the Battle of the Boyne, I mean, a needless slaughter, and it caused all kinds of trouble, the whole Jacobite versus Hanoverian succession and so on and so on. Intellectuals could have sorted this out. You know, there were geniuses on both sides. I'm a great believer in healing conflict through intellectual reconciliation. Now we have the problems of Brexit, and we have the complete meltdown of trust in politics in the UK. Unfortunately, the people that set up the Brexit referendum weren't clever enough. Cameron, as I said last lecture, didn't think it through. He gave in to the baying Tory right, the anti-intellectual right, who are Sophiaphobes. What's coming out now more and more, and this last week more and more, is that we were played. We've known this all along, but now we've got the Russian ambassador at the time actually stating in public, you know, we've crushed the British. We did it deliberately, we played them, we've set them against each other, and they're never going to recover from this for a very long time. I don't think he's right. I think when the British people realise, oh,